We often envision filling space with vast megastructures people might live on in the future, and mining asteroids provide the materials for their construction. But what would life as an asteroid miner be like? (3554 Amun) is a near-Earth asteroid a few kilometers across that orbits the Sun every 351 days, and gets as close to it as 0.7 AU and as far as 1.25 AU. In the early 22nd century, it was one of the first mined asteroids, and the Amun Mining Company helped develop a number of the techniques now taken for granted by modern miners. However, most of its materials were used up building the first O'Neill cylinder at the L5 Lagrange point, and workers began moving on to new prospects. But many remained, trying to convert that mined-out asteroid into a port of call, one that often came near Venus, and to repurpose it to the industries of making space-based solar panels, mirrors, and hydroponics. The same was not true of its cousin, 1685 Toro, which was mined principally for silicon to make Earth's orbital power grid, and when that project was done, became a ghost town almost overnight. All the more so because an attempt to protect the equipment still there from scavengers till it could be retrieved or recycled involved leaving behind prototype battle droids designed to be able to function over long light-lag distances. The Toro Treaty of 2185 saw those types of machines banned, but the asteroid remains infested with them, and the design became popular with many small prospectors for guarding their claims, and the designs remain available through the black market. Many small prospectors disappear, likely for diverse reasons, but homemade knockoff Toro bot guardians tends to be a common suspect, and many believe hundreds if not thousands of asteroids in the belt are infested with them by the early 24th century. There's quite a market for them and similar designs anyway, as well as clanking self-replicator mining bots, with many asteroids also infested with them. But it is a black market, and the same for a lot of cybernetic upgrades and augmentation, those which either skirt the law and function, or which have dubious quality control. Jen Gaunt has some of both kinds. That's not her real name presumably, but nobody asked many questions at the Undina mining camp, over 3 astronomical units from the Sun. At nearly 80 miles wide, Undina is a very dense metallic asteroid at 4.4 grams per cubic centimeter, and rotates on its axis every 16 hours, which means every 2 Earth days it rotates thrice. The sun will rise at 8 in the morning, then again at midnight, then again at 4 in the afternoon the next day, then again at 8 in the morning 2 days later. Gravity is about 1% of Earth normal, and the escape velocity is just over 200 miles per hour, and that combined with the high density made it a very attractive mining prospect. And it was too, but not as good as was expected, and so the company that first got official rights to mine the place went belly up after a mix of low profits, a worker injury scandal, and a government bribery scandal. There was a big argument over who owned what, especially as a lot of the equipment already on Undina was either partially constructed or damaged. In the end, some of the workers refused to leave, and even though the country that technically owned the rock slammed an embargo on it, not many other governments or entities felt obliged to honor it. What's more, one of the few major and functional pieces of equipment on Undina was the large shipping railgun, Old Unreliable, designed to send material back to Earth, which makes a fairly decent improvised anti-ship cannon, and only a few nations have a space navy of note yet, and Undina's original nation wasn't one of those. Nobody felt like testing out how unreliable Old Unreliable was as a defense platform. So the call went up to come to Undina and get your share and join in the mining. Make your fortune. So long as you knew what you were doing or had some other valuable skill, you were welcome, no questions asked. Jen Gaunt found that was not true. They do ask your name when you show up, first and last. And the clerk at the spaceport in early 2349 wasn't taking no for an answer, so when she saw how skinny and gaunt she was coming out of her hibernation pod, she got her inspiration. She's worked in space for a while and has a lot of cybernetic augmentation, a lot of which clearly wasn't premium goods installed by premium doctors. Undina is a place of gossip and rumors, with several hundred people on it, and spaceships coming in from nearby smaller asteroids to use Old Unreliable to ship their metals home. Folks say she knows mining okay, but not great, and as long as she's clearly lived in space, she probably used to work at a mine, but not as a miner. Most folks at Undina think of themselves as a miner even if they have another job. It's a bit of a cultural thing, like walking around with a gun and knowing how to play poker. She is good at both, and she's augmented enough to be able to work in leaky suits, and only needs to sleep 8 hours every 2 Earth days, so Undina suits her better than her spacesuit does, and she hires out to smaller teams needing an extra pair of hands running a spectrometer or vacuum welding a damaged gas tank, and she's got cybernetic eyes to help her see tiny cracks and leaks others would need a microscope or infrared scanner to spot. Folks working on Undina, beyond the original crew that remained and a few others, mostly are working for someone else, and the near-term dream is to save up enough for your own mining gear and a portable, inflatable habdome. Undina is almost as big as West Virginia, and so there's a lot of place to hunt for a good strike where no one has ever been. The big dream, though, is to have your own spaceship, and a decent portion of the folks who worked on Undina early on and had access to a lot of the initial survey data have bought their own ship. Jen came in on one of these, but the captain won't say where they were. Not like the Robinson family, who paint the beacon ID numbers on their ships from every rock they go to, and put dots and clusters on for repeats. They make it to Undina every few months and stick out like a sore thumb for being cleaner than most in body and language. They make use of Old Unreliable, and Mr. Robinson, their ship's captain, used to be one of its engineers. His wife and navigator was navigator for the first ship to run the Phantom blockade on Undina and bring in supplies. They are well respected on Undina, though it is joked their teeth have the highest albedo of any object in the solar system, and while they do mining, they also do a lot of salvage and rescue, and often bring along intrepid adventurers to help explore abandoned ships or mining facilities and check on beacons that have gone offline. They are locally famous for helping attack the mining camp where a homemade clanking self-replicator had been assembled by one lazy miner who did not survive his poor programming skills. One of their most recent adventures was clearing some space pirates out of a small family mine they'd taken over in late 2348. They know some of the pirates escaped, and were able to account for all but one of their former residents' bodies. Their ship is top-notch and impeccably clean and well-equipped, with its own hydroponics, nuclear reactor, and ion drive, along with an onboard processor able to help them make a thermite-like rocket fuel while processing metals with some of the surplus. While a lot of asteroid miners dream of becoming like the Robinsons themselves dream of helping to colonize abandoned mines and helping set up trade throughout the belt. The asteroids will never really run out of metals and other valuable minerals, but as a given rock has most of its more valuable deposits cleared out, it becomes less of a boom industry there, and people seek to migrate, and there's not much attraction to moving back into an abandoned site, where most anything useful is removed anyway. So reclaiming those asteroids might be a long time off, but they can encourage other new miners like themselves who grab a claim of their own to use their early profits to help invest in future non-mining industries and improvements, for when their proverbial well starts getting drier. But for most asteroid miners, this isn't their priority. The metal markets back home are always eager for more metals, mundane and precious, but only at competitive costs. So as long as someone's willing to take a badly patched ship and suit out to mine, the supply stays high for demand, and prices and profits tend to stay low. But many folks do win the lottery, as it were, and there's few faster ways in space in the mid-third millennia to get rich quicker than as an asteroid miner, even if selling supplies and services to them is a more certain path to prosperity. There are thousands of other jobs in an emerging asteroid community, and we may tell their tales another time, but they all rely on the asteroid miner to help them dig into their future niche. This episode originally aired on Nebula last year and was inspired by our episode at the time, Living in Space, and our previous Nebula exclusive, Nomadic Miners on the Moon. In that episode, Living in Space, I noted there were many different lives one might lead up there, as it is, after all, vastly bigger than Earth, and there are a vast number of different lifestyles, careers, and communities here on Earth. Given time, every job we have down here will need to be up there too, and even more that we don't need down here, as we discussed in our recent episode, Jobs in Space. And yet, as I was writing Living in Space, I thought a good follow-up on the topics, as well as on the previous Nebula exclusive, Nomadic Miners on the Moon, would be to look at the life of an asteroid miner in those relatively early days of space settlement, after many folks had gone into mining in space, but not yet when billions of people had taken up residence in the asteroid belt. And there is that big question of if this will be a process only done by major corporations or one by minor miners, one person or a small group. And in either case, are we looking at an asteroid mine becoming a corporate mining town like some Appalachian coal mines did, or a camp full of prospectors turning into some boom town, where people come from all around at word of a gold strike, some hoping to find gold in a river pan, and others hoping to find it in someone's pocket when they came into town to trade gold nuggets for supplies and services. We don't want to overdo the analogies though. Those Wild West tales speak to us and so make a good conversion to science fiction stories, but don't necessarily work so well for realistic futures in space. As an example, some young couple along the east coast of the US in the year 1849 might have heard of the gold rush out in California, sold their small farm or house, and used the money to get a wagon and supplies to take them out west. There wouldn't be a railroad out to even St. Louis for another decade, and another after that before we had a rail to the west coast, after the American Civil War. So you either went overland the whole way or took a ship to go to the Mississippi River and on from there, as there was no Panama Canal yet either. Once there, assuming you could even find gold, there was still a strong chance you would die. And then your widow might work your claim by herself or take a job in whatever town sprung up. Same for kids, and there wouldn't be any sort of schoolhouse at that time and place. They were pretty rare even in more developed areas. Over time, some of those towns were mined out and abandoned, while others grew to become large cities with diverse economies, and the longer they lasted and the more they grew, the more options sprung up. Maybe you had a schoolhouse or a hospital or a church or a library or a park. The frontier became developed towns of law and order and options. Would this analogy hold in space the final frontier? Maybe. First, you only have lone travelers or small young families packing up to move west, or anti-sunward perhaps, if they can afford to do so. Unless you're a billionaire right now, even selling everything you own isn't getting you a trip to deep space. For the period to be reached, I think we have to see a meeting in the middle of rising personal income and assets meeting a reduction in space travel costs, where the average household's net assets might equal or exceed the price to fly that household out to the belt. A rise in income and a drop in launch costs both seem very plausible, but it's a question of if they'll ever meet and also, if so, of when and where those two cross. In one reality, you are heading out in a private personal spaceship, like we saw with the Robinson family earlier today. And in another, you might be riding in hibernation after you starved and dehydrated yourself for a while to lower your shipping mass, like we saw with Jen Gaunt. Or even went out as a brain in a jar to be implanted into an android body that was better equipped for space environments. Or maybe that android is just a robot used for mining or defending your mind from predators. Of course, in a more transhuman future, the cyborg body designed for space might be the luxury option. And a more post-scarcity environment, the basic family spaceship might be a palace compared to something like the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars, or Serenity from Firefly, and still be considered by the culture of that time to be no better than living in a covered wagon or a mobile home. We also want to keep in mind that we're generally a lot more organized these days, so if the government decided to subsidize the process, it might be a good deal more effective than a lot of the land-grant options of America's past, such as under the Homesteading Act. Emphasis on might, since space and light lag and billions of miles leaves a lot of room for messing things up. Overall, while on the one hand it is hard to see more prosperous and advanced civilizations having repeats of a lot of the hardship, fraud, and abuse of early settlement that we know from the tales of the Wild West, there is a certain reality behind the notion, as a lot of times people are going to go as soon as they think they can make it happen and with a lifestyle they can endure. Later they might find out their endurance wasn't as good as they thought, or fortune was cruel to them, but even if not, signing on for a life of hardship is a lot different than living through it, something I think most of us understand personally still, even living in one of the most prosperous eras of humanity. We could imagine an initial subsidy might involve giving people a personal spaceship, but as cool as that sounds, many would think there's not a lot of reason to send a human out prospecting when some small drone could do it as well. We might hesitate at fully automated mining, especially this self-replicating kind, but we have had good experience with robot exploration and sample taking. However, we don't really know what prospecting will entail. By default, I would guess you either need to drill into a rock in several places to get a decent guess at what it has, or you need to vaporize samples out by slicing it with a laser and running spectrometry on the gas coming out. For that situation, we could imagine a drone landing on an asteroid, most of which rotates several times in Earth Day, and dropping on some spot before spreading open some solar panels to power a laser and just drilling a thin deep hole and sucking in the exhausted vapor to run analysis on for its content, and probably extending a camera down a fiber optic cable to look at the sides. It's probably collecting a lot of vaporized oxygen gas from this process, since most rock contains a lot of oxygen. So as the sun begins rotating out of view, it takes that compressed excess gas and uses it to move to the next spot where the sun is just coming up. There is very little gravity for it to fight even on a large asteroid. It might also have manipulator legs and just crab walk around to stay in the sun. The sun is pretty weak in the deeper belt, farther out, but probably still can be used effectively for many purposes. Once it's got all its samples and sends that data on, it can fly on to the next asteroid. I would also guess we would tend to spike most asteroids on their north or south pole with a tall rod containing a battery and a few solar panels and a transmitter that just announces the beacon number and time. It would remain eternally in sunlight, or very nearly so by being at the pole. Or maybe you run on a radioisotope thermal generator and you might run an atomic clock off that too. This way everyone knows which asteroid is which, and every asteroid marked this way adds to your positional accuracy in that area. I don't see that being a job a human would need to do, but I could actually see this being something that humans did do: slam a pole into the asteroid's pole and hang your country's flag on it, which has some solar panels shaped into that flag to add stiffness and utility. Possibly a prestige thing, maybe even a treaty-required clause. No territory can be claimed without putting a boot on it first, and when containing a human foot too, no robot flag planters. Maybe even no robots with any industrial capacity are allowed to operate without human oversight. We might imagine that as a pretty potent ceremonial and official role then, our flag planter. In that same way, we could imagine that claiming an asteroid required a constant human presence for a period of time, in which case doing the drilling yourself or running the drones from your ship makes a lot of sense. The key thing to understand is that there are millions of asteroids in the belt, and tens of thousands of near-Earth asteroids, and a ton more Trojan asteroids out by Jupiter, and more out in the Kuiper belt, and plenty just meandering around the solar system. It's also important to understand that the asteroid belt itself contains a volume considerably larger than that in which the Sun and the 4 inner planets are in. Even just considering the main donut most are in, that's such a huge and diffuse volume that the idea of a unified asteroid belt, as we often see in sci-fi, would seem as out of place a unified Pacific Ocean that only included islands in it and the coastal regions of the continents bordering it. Especially as in the case of asteroid islands, they float about in that sea, churning around and changing their positions relative to each other. This year's neighbor moves away. So it's more like a nation of boats than islands. This seems like an environment in which a lot of chaos and mobility would be built into that society and emerging culture, or cultures, as there's not likely to be much unification of regions of the belt, let alone with those other asteroid groups, and the near-Earth asteroids are likely to be those first and most enthusiastically pursued. I'm not sure that an asteroid miner is likely to be a citizen of any particular place either. Second-generation miners might not even have been born any place other than their ship or family mining base, thus might not have much official status, much as pioneer families often had members that weren't even recorded by the state. I would imagine that most asteroid miners would have a country they called home, whether that was some space nation, like a League of Asteroid Settlements, or some homeland like the US or UK or Norway, or even some place selected for legal or tax advantages. Same for space freighters or modern seagoing freighters for that matter. Your ship and maybe yourself might be registered to whichever nation gave you the most advantage for your job. It isn't hard to imagine some small Pacific nation with a few thousand citizens on their island also having a few thousand citizens who were asteroid miners who had never visited that island. They just pay some token taxes and fees. Maybe they even ship them a kilogram of native dirt to scatter on their ship garden or their asteroid to symbolically claim it. It is a lifestyle that would seem to attract the independently minded, and probably not always in a good way. Historically, a lot of folks took up life as a sailor or moved to a mining town or pioneer frontier to leave their previous life behind, and often one step ahead of the law or after leaving a prison or a scandal. It's probably worth noting that you could be setting up small villages basically off the radar inside an asteroid you had rights to, which might attract the criminally minded and turn into a pirate base or some hidden cult pretty quick. It's not just that you could be having whole families unnoticed out there, you could be running cloning tanks or unrestricted AI, and there's likely to be a worry that's going on by folks back home, which might drive regulation or oversight. Incidentally, this is the moment in the script recording editing for this new segment that I had to pause because some stranger was in our backyard in a recently built shed rummaging around. I escorted him off my property, and he went right across the road to rummage through my neighbor's garage, who is a sweet old retired children's book author, so we called the sheriff at that point, and the deputy picked him up then came back around to get a report. The deputy in question has been my friend for a couple decades, so gave me a friendly lecture about remembering that all the things that attracted us to the rural life, quiet, space all around, privacy, are also attractive to thieves. I found it a bit ironic given the segment of the script I was working on at the time, but it will probably be true of a lot of isolated asteroid mines. That's for the independent miner, of course, and I don't think that's the early environment, but rather big companies with more involvement from home. However, a big aspect of space traveling once you're already up in space is that it doesn't require that much sophistication. All the sleek and tightly manufactured rockets we launch are about getting out of the atmosphere. In space, all that matters is being fairly airtight, because you don't have to fly through a dense atmosphere at super high speeds and while rapidly accelerating. You can do things slower and through a vacuum, so a spaceship that is built in space and only for space has very different and easier parameters. It is just meant to achieve a few kilometers per second of delta V, and free to do that over several days if needed, so it's not quite a home DIY project, but it's also not much above that, and someone could build their own, and so too, a small company could be turning them out for prices we think of for cars, RVs, and tractors, not jets or rockets. Speaking of Delta V, let me give a shout out to the book of that name by my friend Daniel Suarez, which is an awesome techno-thriller about asteroid mining. Even the airtight part isn't too important. A ship with a 10 kilowatt generator on board for running life support, lighting, computers, water recycling, and so on would only need to devote maybe a kilowatt of that to electrolyzing water for oxygen, even if you were leaking hundreds of liters a day. But the other thing is that, as we mentioned earlier, metal production from rock or regolith produces a lot of oxygen, more than you want to breathe. Humans need between a pound to a kilogram of oxygen a day, depending on their size and activity. You're not making much money as an asteroid miner if you're not producing many kilograms of metal a day, preferably thousands. So you've got oxygen coming out your ears, and a lot of mining bases and ships traveling to them might be very indifferent to air leakage and even skip on CO2 scrubbing equipment in favor of letting slow leaks remove the CO2. The ship they go prospecting with might not be used for metal transport either. You might settle on a rock and use your ship as your base and refinery, with lots of expandable or inflatable sections. We assume at some point you fill up and leave with your metal cargo, but you might just be stuffing into some expendable capsule with a tiny solar panel to run guidance and a beacon. You fill that full of metal ore ingots and pressurized oxygen, and let that provide the thrust to get it headed towards some collection point. Or even have an electromagnetic catapult or pressurized cannon for firing the ingots or capsules away, possibly with just enough compressed oxygen for maneuvering on arrival at a collection point. Most of that gear might be casually reusable like propane tanks are. Or you might ship your ore by making it into a tank and filling it with air for propellant. especially if you had some decent basic manufacturing like making steel or rolling and welding it into basic shapes. For some folks, asteroid mining life might simply be a transition phase. You head out in your futuristic covered wagon for your claim, and you land your family or group on some likely rock and start unpacking and building and shipping metal off by cannon, or in trade to arriving freighters, and it pays for your initial cost to get there and get set up, and you keep doing it but while using a lot of your production to build a space habitat, hydroponics, spin gravity hab drums, and a homestead or even a village in space. In this way, you might move from life as an asteroid miner to life as a space farmer or asteroid colony. So as channel regulars know, this episode originally aired on Nebula a year ago, and every month I make an extra episode that gets released at the start of each month, then released here on YouTube a year later at the end of the month, replacing the end of the month live stream Q&As we used to do on the last Sunday. This month's Nebula exclusive is Exploring the Multiverse, where we join all the different versions of multiverses, alternate realities, and parallel dimensions that physics suggests in various theories. And on October 1st, 2024, our next monthly Nebula exclusive, Caretaker AI and Genus Loci, will premiere. Another awesome part of Nebula is that you can see all of our episodes a few days early and ad-free, along with exclusive and bonus content from myself and many other creators, like our monthly Nebula exclusive episodes. Using my code, IsaacArthur, you can get 40% off and join for about $3 a month, about the price of the drink or snack you've been enjoying during the episode. We also now have lifetime memberships and gift cards available to let you share Nebula with friends and family. When you sign up at my link, go.nebula.tv/IsaacArthur, and use my code, IsaacArthur, you not only get access to all the great stuff Nebula offers, like Exploring the Multiverse, you'll also be directly supporting this show. So that's it for September, and we'll start October off by asking if large moons like our own might be a great filter of the Fermi Paradox. Then we'll travel to one of Jupiter's larger moons, Io, to ask how and why we might settle that volcanic moon. Then it'll be time for Sci-Fi Sunday to explore the concept of mushroom-like extraterrestrials and fungal aliens. If you'd like to get alerts when those and other episodes come out, make sure to hit the like, subscribe, and notification buttons. You can also help support the show by becoming a member here on YouTube or Patreon, or check out other ways to help at isaacarthur.net. SFIA's episodes also come out early and ad-free on our streaming service Nebula, like this month's exclusive episode, Exploring the Multiverse, at go.nebula.tv/IsaacArthur. As always, thanks for watching, and have a great week.